trust in traditional media is declining so rapidly all around the world, people are turning to podcasts to get their education.
Finally, creators have got advertisers who can at least help sustain certain shows, and brands have got that platform to integrate their products inside. So can we say that the AI finally can cover that gap?
And so I do feel like the power of AI is to be that matchmaker. So there's so many different ways that the AI can help qualify the shows at scale.
Why don't the companies spend on their audio?
But I think it's just about being able to bring the advertisers the confidence that they need, that they can transact in audio the same way, apples to apples, as they can in any other digital channel. People like to joke that in advertising it's not life or death, but like brand trust is built in drops and lost in buckets, and you can lose billions of dollars in brand value with one bad placement. This year was the first year that brand marketers outspent performance marketers in the US.
How do you see the role of the CEO?
So I think the biggest transition from like founder to CEO is going from big vision to low-level granular numbers and metrics. Entrepreneurship is like eating glass.
Hello everyone. Today on this episode, we're going to talk about something special. So since yesterday was actually an International Podcasting Day, so it got me thinking. There are multiple parties in this industry that are constantly looking for the ways to convert and to evolve in this industry. So what are the core problems? A lot of content creators, and specifically podcasters and individual creators, are looking for the ways to sustain their shows for a long time, to add depth, and to make sure that their shows can attract different types of audiences and potentially monetize. Advertisers are looking for the great content to place their advertising campaigns into to drive reasonable results for their clients. Brands, on the other side, are looking for the more organic integration into a really great, safe, and valuable content to reach more audiences. And all these three parties cannot really meet efficiently. So it got me thinking that we need to try and find a solution. Is this the way for this industry to evolve? And my special guest for this episode is Dr. Tamara Zubatiy, who came to us from the US, and she's the co-founder of the company called Barometer. Barometer is actually revolutionizing the way the algorithms are analyzing the content. So we're going to talk about her business, and we're going to talk about whether there's a way with AI within podcasting or any other broader content creation industry. Welcome, Dr. Tamara. How are you today?
I'm so well. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Busy day, right?
Amazing. Another amazing busy day. It's only Tuesday, but it feels like it's been a whole week.
Where did you go to? Which companies did you visit today? Where did you have your meetings? I mean, if you can talk about that.
I'm not sure.
That's fine. What are the core issues that you were able to discuss, let's say?
Yeah, we met with 3 holding companies today, and we were really talking about what are their challenges in terms of spending on audio. And what do their clients point to as the reasons why not to spend on audio? And then which clients do they have that love audio already, and how can we grow it? So we learned a lot about their priorities and the things that they cared about today.
So why don't the companies spend on their audio?
There's so many reasons. So one of the reasons let's start from like the life cycle of a campaign, planning stage. We're not in the mixed media model. There's no podcast in the mixed media model. So if that's what you're starting with, already excluded. Another reason is creative. They might not have audio creative. So one of the reasons we're here is we're partners of Next Broadcast Media, and they actually just launched a tool that can help a brand instantly generate audio creative. Mm-hmm. This is now becoming more and more common. So people are working with AI to break down that barrier. But the other 2 big barriers are scale and measurement. And measurement has to do with did it convert? Kind of what happened. And we'll talk about that later. But scale is really tough because there's over 300,000 active podcasts. But to your point, how does a brand know which one to buy? And then where does it go to buy it? So overcoming that barrier in an agency-friendly, simple way that doesn't require going to every individual publisher, that became a really interesting question. How do you enable scale, and what's holding people back from scale? One of the answers to that question is brand safety and brand suitability, or can they even vet all of that content in time before they run?
And the question is, how can we do that as humans and with the processes that we got used to have in terms of discovering content, scaling the shows, let's say, finding the stories. Can we do that ourselves as humans, or do we need to use certain tools that can help us do so? And I understand Barometer is one of those tools that can literally sort of help advertisers get much more efficient with discovering their shows, right?
Totally.
What is so revolutionizing about Barometer, if you just introduced us to?
Absolutely. So before Barometer, if a large brand wanted to run on podcasts, a human had to listen to an episode, approve the episode, and they maybe had like a crazy spreadsheet where they were like, this had this many F words and whatever the things that they cared about. Because of that, the limitation was human time. There's 24 hours in a day. Well, there's 300,000 podcasts.
Yeah.
So Barometer is unique because we built a proprietary AI that listens to the podcasts, and it's trained on 190 years of transcribed audio content. So it would have taken a human 190 years to listen to all the content that Barometer has learned from. And now what that allows an advertiser to do is, say in the past they would have had to evaluate one show because they needed to listen to 10 episodes, that's 10 hours. Now, in about 30 seconds, they can filter a catalog of 16,000 titles to only find the titles that they require. And in programmatic environments, they can even instantly pre-bid target without needing to do anything in advance. So it has just completely transformed the effort required to vet content. And it's also made it a lot easier to systematically apply your brand standards across multiple publishers for both direct and programmatic campaigns.
It's interesting. And I have a question. Say, since we are sitting in our region, right? Say, I hear a lot from advertising companies and, let's say, from probably marketers as well, saying that either there's not enough great content locally where they could place their advertising, or where they could integrate their marketing campaigns, let's say. At the same time, individual creators and podcasters are constantly working towards scaling their shows, talking about culture, talking about society, or integrating humor into these conversations, which create. It seems to be that there's a huge platform for advertisers to consider. But the question is this not enough? Is this the problem of being of the content that is being not enough, or is this the discovery issue?
I think it's also a discovery issue sometimes, because there is, to your point, plenty of content with so much reach, huge audiences, very engaged. There's lots of data to support it. But what if the planner doesn't speak Arabic?
What do we do?
What do you do? So there's so many simple little barriers. For example, Barometer will transcribe it in whichever dialect. We cover 17 dialects of Arabic, and then translate it into English so the media planner can see what exactly happened. And I also think that there's a kind of don't let your biases get in the way of the data. So people might think oh, my audience isn't listening in this region, but if you just give it a chance, you'll actually be able to see which shows they're listening to and across which areas. And then furthermore, it's a really, people have a lot of misconceptions about this region. There's a lot of biases and stereotypes that aren't really true when you come here. And so, for example, in Dubai, there's so many expats. There's a huge English-speaking community. And so there's people listening to the top shows globally here as well. And so when you work with a partner like Next Broadcast Media, you can target the top titles in the region, but you can also target the top titles globally. And I think that combination is actually very unique. And unique to this region. So I actually think that there's a greater potential for more reach here than in other places.
But can we state that if, for example, AI gets involved into connecting, let's say, advertisers' content and the brands, it might be that this ecosystem will flourish from a sort of content perspective, because finally creators have got advertisers who can at least help sustain certain shows, and brands have got that platform to integrate their products inside. So can we say that the AI finally can cover that gap? And what's your point of view on that? You don't have to have the right answer to that. I'm just asking you because I can feel like you've got that point of view about technology and its power in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the technology can scale the human ability. Like, our goal is never to eliminate the humans out of the picture. It's to empower the humans to be better at what they're doing. And so I do feel like the power of AI is to be that matchmaker, to provide, I call it like either confidence enablement or qualifying the content. So how do we elevate the content in the eyes of the advertiser? We can understand what is it talking about and provide the contextual data that can say, this is super relevant to your audience. We can provide the brand safety validation that we can say, this won't hurt your brand. In fact, this is very aligned with your brand standards. We can look at like the audience data about those shows. So there's so many different ways that the AI can help qualify the shows at scale. And then once you're ready, the AI helps you play matchmaker. You can just enter your targets, and then it applies them onto the entire inventory set to help you find only the titles that met your criteria. And so by simplifying away all of that manual work that was previously required, I think that's ultimately how AI can create that virtuous cycle. And to your point, it is something that's cyclical. So it's not always all at once. Maybe you start out with an advertiser and they start with you and they buy 5 shows, and you show them that you're willing to listen to them and do what they say, and they'll perform. And then you'll say, okay, now that you trust us on these 5 shows, let's scale that same target to our whole network. And that's incrementally how you start building that circle of trust, that then they keep performing better, they keep spending more, but all it takes is that first initial overcoming of the hurdles, and you never know why they could say no. So you never want to be in a position where they could say, oh, no, I can't do it because you don't have brand safety. Like, that's a trivial reason that we now can overcome. Similarly, you don't want to do it if they're like, oh, well, I can't do it because there's no attribution. There is attribution, and you can absolutely do it. So I think it's just about being able to bring the advertisers the confidence that they need, that they can transact in audio the same way, apples to apples, as they can in any other digital channel.
How big should be the show to be able to get under the eye of something like Barometer, let's say? So, and where it has to be uploaded? On a normal advertising platform? Are you integrated there or?
Great question. All 50,000 titles in Barometer have been self-selected by advertisers or publishers that are our partners. So there's shows of so many different sizes. We have like everything from Joe Rogan to teeny tiny show with niche listenership that certain performance marketers in America found worked really well for their audience. And I think when you're really using the data to target, you can remove some of those biases that you have about, like, some people are like, oh, I need like the show to have a certain number of listeners. But really, like, for example, there's this network and they have surgeons and all the hosts are surgeons and they have a really small audience, but every listener is a doctor. And so it's like, that's a small number, but it's the exact audience that you need. It's pre-qualified and they're so highly relevant to your subject. So that's just one example where podcasting can really provide a totally unique value.
Yeah, definitely. And where the technology, or technically, where is the show has to be uploaded to be able to be discovered?
It can be literally anywhere, as long as you have an open RSS feed, and that's not in a walled garden. So we just learned exclusivity is no longer a thing. So there's really not that many of those anymore, if any. So really, you can host your show anywhere. All we need is an RSS feed.
Right. That's interesting. And now the question to you as an entrepreneur, let's say, obviously, like when I talk to founders and co-founders, I understand that most of the companies that grew, they actually reached the moment where they realized that they found the market gap. Was this the case with Barometer and yourself?
Absolutely. I would say recently got to product market fit. It took us some time, and I feel like it was because we were really educating the market in a lot of ways. So brand safety isn't a new problem, but it wasn't happening yet in podcasting. And so we kind of had to invent the problem, and then we had to come solve it. So it took a couple of years of education for the clients and even publishers. Publishers initially were like, they're buying it. why should we disturb them from buying it as they are? And I was like, well, how much are they spending? Don't you want them to spend more? And so it started kind of from that.
So, but how did you discover that this is podcasting where you have to start with? I mean, you've mentioned that you've got a PhD in human-centric AI. Maybe you can elaborate on that. And because I understand that's the core principle that was behind the area you were trying to explore, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this has been a very long journey. So the way that we found podcasts was it was a process. When we started, we were analyzing print and digital news, and we were analyzing it for like editorial bias and sensationalism, things that we kind of made up. What we realized was many things. It was also a direct-to-consumer service. First of all, consumers didn't care about what we had to say, but businesses who had money on the line actually did care about what was in the content. So that was our first kind of discovery. It was advertisers who cared about what was in the content, not the readers. Mm-hmm. And the second discovery was that people weren't consuming news in the traditional ways anymore. And they were actually consuming trust in traditional media is declining so rapidly all around the world. People are turning to podcasts to get their education. So that was an interesting thing. And then the third and most important thing is podcasts are syndicated on the open RSS feeds. So it was actually possible for us to grab the audio files and build this training data set by transcribing them. So when we started doing all of those things, at first we thought that our market would be advertisers. And our very first customer for this product was a big agency, and we thought we were gonna be rich. We were like, okay, cool, this is awesome. They signed a 5-year contract. Our company was 1 year old, 2 years old. Like, it was amazing. And then we realized maybe not. They were using it, but they were actually a performance marketing focused agency. And that was one of the first things that we realized was in America, brands weren't buying podcasts. And that was our insight, was if you look at the top 10 advertisers in podcasts in America, you don't know any of them. But if you look at the top 10 advertisers globally, they don't spend anything in podcasts or anything close to what they should be. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of our insight, was why. And when we realized that, we realized two things. First thing we realized was that publishers and agencies are on the same side.
Right.
It's everybody versus the brand. And that was a really big insight, because what we started doing was selling the same information to publishers as agencies. And then they were able to work together. Instead of having this like fake veil, like, oh, what shows am I going to run? Oh, no, I can't tell you. Oh, you can't cherry pick. None of that. Everybody has the same data, and that started overcoming the boundaries, and then we started seeing the numbers. So this year was the first year that brand marketers outspent performance marketers in the US. This year, programmatic doubled in the US for digital audio. So all of these things came together, and I'm not going to take full credit for any of this, but we were a part of why those shifts happened.
Right. And now you're sort of, we chatted a bit before we started recording, actually. So your job as a co-founder, so you co-founded with your husband,
yes.
Correct? And your husband, so what's his role in the structure, and what's your role? Let's talk about, the organization and how you grow.
Totally. So he's the CTO, fully in charge of the product, and I'm the CEO and the sales lead. So we have a CRO as well, and he and I are partners because I can't do all of the sales. He's an expert in media. I like to joke that he has a PhD in media. His name is John Sardellis. He's literally been selling audio longer than I've been alive. Mm-hmm. So that's a really helpful compliment to us. My husband is very technical. He doesn't like to talk to people. He doesn't like to speak on podcasts or sales. So we make a really good team from that perspective. I like to joke that every time in a sales call that I open my mouth, he has like 8 more hours of work to do. But we make a really good team.
I was going to ask you if you're all coders there in your company, like considering you've got a PhD in human-centric AI, I would assume your husband is from that area as well.
Exactly. Yeah, we both did our undergrad in machine learning. Thankfully, I'm not coding anymore. Everybody's very happy about that.
Why is that?
He's a much cleaner coder than me and makes way less mistakes. And so no clients would have been happy if I was coding. But also he knows how to hire for talented programmers. Mm-hmm. And so 5 of our 7 full-time team members are coders. And within that, Grant is our CTO, so he's in charge of kind of the whole platform architecture. We have over 30 machine learning models that we've trained ourselves, so the ensemble of managing them on Amazon Web Services and all of that infrastructure, that's all him. Our principal AI engineer was at NASA. And then after that, she was in the FDA predicting if pacemakers were going to fail in live humans. So she kind of takes things seriously.
Definitely.
People like to joke that in advertising, it's not life or death, but like brand trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. And you can lose billions of dollars in brand value with one bad placement. People don't like to talk about that, but that's real. And that's why people are so scared. And then we also have an amazing team of like back-end engineers, front-end engineers. We have a full service platform, and we just have this, we just launched our integration into the Trade Desk. So we're the very first podcast pre-bid contextual targeting and brand safety provider ever. And the scale of that integration for our technology team, to give you some idea, this is all public information, but they send 40,000 queries per second. And you have to respond within 2 milliseconds in any region of the world in real time.
That's right.
That was huge for our team.
Yeah. And I was going to say, while I was listening to you about what you mentioned about the resources that are working together now, it seems to be like there's a great balance of people who are bringing your company up to speed and enabling the growth. So the question, do you learn on the way how to hire the right talent? How do you pick resources in the market that need to be, and how do you attract them?
It's a great question. One of the best like feedback pieces I ever got was that everything is sales. So hiring is actually sales. You're selling yourself. You're selling your product, your vision, your future to these people who could go anywhere. The most talented people, they could have any job. And how do you tell them, oh, don't go work at Facebook where they'll pay you 4 times as much and you can do whatever you want? And I really think it's about finding mission-driven people. So we had a very curious hiring process. Like one story I love to tell is how we found our chief revenue officer, and another story is how we found our chief AI officer. So for our chief AI officer, we used LinkedIn jobs, and she applied. And when we met her, we were like, no way. Like this woman could do anything. And she was like, I had a 3-year gap in my resume because I had a daughter. And all the auto resume thingies failed her.
Right. Yeah, it's AI and limitations, correct?
Yes.
So this is definitely would help in the hiring process.
And the technical hires are so different than the human hires.
Yeah.
Technical hires, there's like a whole process. There's like a coding interview and like all of those processes. For sales, it was very different. And one of our biggest disadvantages coming in was we were technical. Advertising is an industry of C students who work for the people who flunked out. So we needed it to level set the way that we were doing everything. And we could not speak media for the life of us. Yeah. Like we had to define CPM in our board meeting. No joke. And so when we were looking for our CRO, we were like, we need somebody that knows everybody already. We need somebody who understands how this works, because at the time we didn't have a CPM-based business model. We had only a subscription service. Yeah. And that was really holding us back in the space because agencies don't have margin to play around with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you had to take a lot of decisions quite fast, right? As you grew and as you probably raised the first round of funds that allowed you to actually hire. So if you were to choose, you would probably to choose the best function within the organization, within the small organization that you have now, but also with time, once it grows more. What would be that function and why?
For me? Or
for yourself, yes.
I think that I'm a pretty decent CEO.
Okay.
I think that role fits for me just because I like having the variety of different things. And when it's this early in the founder to CEO transition, there's still a lot of founder-led sales, and I really enjoy the sales parts of it. But I've also been able to step back from some of the things that I'm bad at, like marketing or the technology side. And so that really allows me to focus on my strengths. And I think that over time, it's going to continue being the person that seeks the top talent, speaking about the company and being kind of the face and the representative of the company. But most importantly, being able to set up the right processes for us to be able to scale and grow without me having to be there micromanaging anybody.
Definitely. So how do you see the role of the CEO? You started elaborating on that, but how do you see the role of the CEO in a fast growing startup like yours?
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of hats. It's a lot of spreadsheets. So I think the biggest transition from like founder to CEO is going from big vision to low level granular numbers and metrics. And I think that like being able to make that transition is quite challenging because they're totally different skill sets. And so I think that's kind of where I'm focusing right now is improving my skills in some of those areas so that I can continue to be better.
But does your vision somehow still motivate you in terms of how to grow? So are you sort of participating in product development process, or are you more in terms of how do we sort of work on our finances? How do we work on our, strategic development, and how do we pitch that to different investors, perhaps? So how do you evolve in that role, let's say?
That's totally the advantage of having a smaller team is it's a very horizontal organization. So I come to tech meeting and I come to research meeting and I'm still guiding a lot of the research agenda of the company. Maybe I'm not coding day to day, but I'm the one that's like, based on what the customers are saying, this is what we need to do next. And so being able to be that bridge all the way down from the sales conversation up into the technology is an extremely powerful thing to be able to do, because the other advantage of being small is we're quick. So when an advertiser tells us we need this, we have it tomorrow instead of waiting a year if it was like a bigger company.
So basically, you are participating in sort of strategic development of your actual product.
Yeah, we have a process. It's called WSJIF. Weighted shortest job first is, I believe, what it stands for. And so I work on the sales side to define what they asked for, but then we go in and Grant helps me understand how long would that take. And then we prioritize it based on how much money could we make if we made that feature, and then how urgent is it for us to make that feature. And then it's a math problem. And then we have our feature list, and it says, you're supposed to do this first, and then this. And then, of course, nothing goes the way that you planned because it's a startup, and then you have to change things. But that's kind of one of the methods that we would use to bridge that gap from all the way from the sales into the tech.
That's interesting. But I've seen your workload, and it's massive for sure. Even here in Dubai, I've seen you a couple of days, and you're constantly at the meetings, so representing the company, doing the marketing, by the way, on the podcast like that. So I think that's a great way to promote. So one of the questions that I ask my guests who are in the leadership positions, if you had to choose any mentor of the world, who would that be for you?
It's a great question. There's a couple that I'm really interested in right now. I really like Sharon Sandberg. I really think that her experience is just fascinating. And I also really like David Friedberg. I feel like I really like him because of his intellectual honesty. And he has such random interests that are really deep. And I really relate to that. Like, I'm passionate about certain things that have nothing to do with my day job, like health or yoga. And those things are really important to me. And he started like a farming startup. So I think that's one of the people that I'd really like to learn from.
So you would get a piece of advice from them on your business journey, or on how to balance, or what do you think? What do you think the biggest value that would come from that conversation?
I think like dreaming bigger.
Okay.
And never stopping. I feel like they each represent somebody that has objectively achieved like means success, but it's like an addiction. Like, you want to keep inventing and keep going, but people underestimate how painful it is. Like, I would say Elon, I controversially don't hate the man. I think he's super inspiring and really cool. But one of the things that he says is like entrepreneurship is like eating glass. And it's true. It's so painful. Like, it sucks every day. It's so painful. But why do we do it? It's like the sick like thing. And so being able to talk to somebody who shares that sickness can be helpful.
That's interesting. And another question that I usually ask the guests who are in the leadership positions. So if you were to choose to lead a team of people, would you prefer a team who are more creative, let's say, more passion-driven, more vision-driven, or would you prefer to lead a team of operational people who are actually, doing the everyday handy job day to day?
It's such a good question. I feel like the passionate people, because you could teach somebody how to do the details, but you can't teach somebody the passion or the drive. And if you work at a startup, it's not the same as like working in a corporate environment. If you work 8 hours a day, we'll fail. And if that's what you're going to come in thinking, it's not going to work. So I think that that's like the most important thing for me is how aligned are people with the mission?
Yeah.
And will they stay up all night working
Yeah.
towards the mission? Not to say that time off isn't important. We have unlimited time off because
Yeah.
we also understand the work is really tough, but yeah.
That's nice. And that was a great conversation, Tamara. I'm just mindful of time, and I know you've had a long day, and we're still having another meeting to get to. And thank you so much. That was very insightful, talking about AI, talking about advertising and content industry, and talking about leadership and growing your company. I think that's huge. So good luck with Barometer. I'm a big fan already. And thank you very much for stopping by at Portster.
Thanks so much for having me, Lara. It's a pleasure.